Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Alexa and Friends. My name is Jeff Blankenberg, as usual, and today I have the good honor of speaking with Prem Natarajan, who is. I'm going to let him introduce himself. I want to make sure that he gets that opportunity. So, good morning.
Hey, Jeff, good morning, and appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself to the audience.
Certainly.
I lead all the I'm part of the Alexa AI organization. I'm a vice president in Alexa, and I lead all the natural understanding work in AI. We'll talk a little bit more about it as we get through the hour, but it's all the stuff that you like interacting with Alexa
Very good. Yeah, we're gonna dive deep into that today. So the thing that I warned you about, but I didn't give you any background on, is that we like to start these sessions with some fun questions to kind of give the audience an opportunity to get to know you a little bit and a little bit about who you are as a person, I guess, is really the way we think about this. So I have three questions that I'm going to ask you, and you've had no preparation for these, so I just want to prepare you right now. So the first question that I like to ask is, between these three, which one of these in your life is the messiest? Is it your bedroom, your car, or your office?
So that's an easy one. Right now, it's my office, and I can give you a little bit of context why, if you're interested. Please. So once we started working from home, I had to, my parents are staying with us right now, so my study is also our guest bedroom. So I had to move out of my study and create a corner in my basement, and so, quick secret, that's where I am, and everybody thinks, Prem, you've got a really nice workspace setup. Right. I said, yeah, this is the 36 square feet of the basement that I've prepared for the camera.
Right. I make those same jokes. I do a lot of streaming, obviously, and I have a small office in my house. And people are like, wow, it's so nice and organized. Like, you have all these devices set up behind you and everything. And this is, like, honestly, if you could see outside the little box that I'm standing in, it's a disaster area. There's stuff everywhere. So I'm completely with you on that one. All right. So you would say that because you're working out of your basement, is that normally the case? Like, is your office in an Amazon building? Is it also tend to lean towards messy, or would you find something else to be that way instead?
A different kind of messy. So my offices in my previous jobs at USC, at Amazon, they're all messy in one aspect. There's stacks of documents and papers everywhere. But that mess is only sort of in the eyes of the people who see. I know exactly where whichever document I want to find is. So I just want to make that clear.
That makes perfect sense to me. I tell my wife the same thing. I know exactly where everything is. Don't touch it. You'll ruin my world. No, I completely understand. All right, let's move on to the second question. This is a fun one. If you could pick any superpower from any of the comic books, any comic book characters you may have ever heard of, but you only pick one of them, what superpower would you pick?
Does it have to be from a comic book?
No, not at all.
So actually, the superpower I would pick, especially because I love music, is singing.
Oh.
I wish I had a singing voice. I wish I could sing, because I think, we all know singing is sort of a special connection to other people. You can take them to ecstasy. You can give them really nuanced emotional feels, etc. And you can convey yourself in that way.
So not just the ability to sing, but the ability to sing really well.
Yeah, I like the superpower would be the world's best singer.
Best singer, right? Man.
So that would be the superpower. But I'd be happy with just a power to sing
just to sing pretty well, right? Do you ever find yourself on a karaoke stage or anything like that?
Only when I'm sure I'm never going back to that place again, so nobody will know.
Oh my gosh, that sounds fantastic. That's great. So that's interesting. Most people choose something like flight or invisibility or something like that, but I like it. I think that's a very reasonable superpower request. I wish I was the best singer in the world. And I'm with you, man. There's a lot of power in being able to sing well, so I think that's great. Okay.
Oh, and tell you, there's a lot of peer pressure at home. My wife is a superb singer.
Oh, man.
All three of my daughters are awesome singers. They're all trained for a the youngest ones are still being trained and they're just superb. And I go there just to clap. I'm the
Oh yeah,
cheerleader.
no, that's great. Well, at least you have a lot of music around you. That's wonderful. All right, so here's my last question. This is the one that a lot of people have a lot of fun with, and there's no wrong answer here. So I'm always interested to see where people go with this. This is one of those situations where you have to pick one. It'll be tempting to say, "Oh, I would just run away," but that is not an option that you get at this question. The question is: would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
Wow. So, so Jeff, I mean, first you have laid the seeds for nightmares for a few days to come.
I apologize.
It's just like, I'm glad we're talking early in the morning. I have a whole day to forget this question. Let's see. Look, if I had to fight, I'd probably take the 100 duck-sized horses. One horse-sized duck, I have no chance of prevailing. I mean, unless I can run away, which you've already precluded. Right. But with 100 duck-sized horses, I'm thinking if I can maybe use crowd psychology, I sort of get one or two of them in a bad way, and then the others are like, man, this dude means to fight, and they run. You didn't preclude them running away, so I have a better chance of getting like 98 duck-sized horses to run away. I like it.
So you're saying I'm going to mess up a couple of these horses, and the rest of them are going to be like, whoa, I don't want anything to do with this guy. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. All right, that's a new approach. I hadn't heard that one before, so that's really it's good information. not that we're going to be running into any duck-sized horses anytime soon, but that's
not in our waking hours.
That's
Jeff,
great.
But
all right, so I did a little bit of research, not a ton, and it seems like you have a rich history with USC and the Trojans down there in California. Do you still live down that way?
Yes, okay. I do. I live in Palos Verdes.
Okay. Very, very good. So one of the things that I really like to unpack is when we have an opportunity to talk to someone like this that has a rich background in understanding and voice and speech, is how did you get here? Because I would imagine when you were an undergrad or even in high school, that wasn't necessarily something that was directly on your radar. It's something that you veered to, you found an interest in, and you've kind of focused on since then. But for a lot of people that are watching, it's always very useful to talk about, like, what was your path like? How did you get here? So I'd love you to start like maybe high school, maybe college, but like what were the decisions that you saw in your life that kind of got you to where you are today?
So my decision-making framework, and I'll answer the question, but my decision-making framework has sort of been relatively sort of a greedy algorithm. I have sort of tended to do what I most enjoy and what seems like will excite me the most. And over time, a second factor came in. Early in my career, it was all about what's the thing that really excites me, that feels challenging, intriguing, that gives me an opportunity to work with good people. Over time, a second factor has emerged, which is becoming more and more important, which is where can I have the most impact? Where can I move the needle the most, right? So it's a very simple decision. Those are the two things I consider now. But to answer your question about how did I get here, I was born in India. I grew up in, India is multilingual, but even within India, I grew up in a particularly multilingual family because the language we speak at home is Tamil. I grew up in Maharashtra, the city of Pune, where the local language spoken is Marathi, and it's Marathi is all around you. But I studied in India's, three-language education system for states where there is no Hindi spoken, which is you learn English, you learn the local vernacular, which is Marathi, and then you learn Hindi. And then at home, it was Tamil. So I think it was sort of inevitable that over time, many of my discussions with my brother, with my cousins, I would often, so every now and then come out, hey, isn't that curious? This language, they say it that way. This language, they say it this way. Or, gee, and even within those languages, Tamil is not Indo-European. The other languages are Indo-European. Tamil is the Dravidian family. So there were sort of structural differences. And without realizing what we were talking about, we'd often talk about, hey, in one language we seem to say come here, and in another we seem to say here come. I wonder why, right? So that's just the context. But in my undergraduate engineering days, I was really most fascinated by robotics. So my senior project, which took up almost all of my senior year spare time and more, was to build a robotic arm using stepper motors, right? I thought a servo controller was too much because we couldn't do it with our budget.
Sure.
So these stepper motors move in small steps and good enough. And I learned a lot. So I came here to study robotics. And after coming here, one of the faculty members told me, Prem, the hardest problems left to solve are all very mathematical. And are you sure that that's, there's a lot? I thought, so I started wandering around thinking of what I want to do. So I started doing, information theory, statistical signal processing. And then I did a summer research internship at IBM in the Watson Research Lab and worked on handwriting recognition.
Oh, cool.
I was hooked. I said, okay, this is awesome, right? Like it was online handwriting recognition. Right. And I was like, this is really nice. Like being able to interpret human input, convert it into something a computer can understand. So then after that got me onto the sort of the language processing field, if you will, formally, and tapped into, I think, an old curiosity that had developed during childhood. And so then I joined BBN Technologies as a scientist. BBN, you can look it up, a pioneering place in speech and language technologies. There are many ex-BBNers at Amazon right now, right? And so, which will get to as I close out my story, you'll see how I ended up at Amazon too. So, so there was all of that history. And then, but back then we were always like, this is all exciting. When are people going to use this at scale?
Right.
Right. And so anyway, my interest expanded. I did handwriting recognition, OCR. Then I did speech recognition. I led the commercial speech engineering team that did the first major deployment in North America of directory assistance routing. It was sort of a confidential project back in those days in the late 90s. Anyway, all of that dialogue systems, they all started coming to the portfolio. I got interested in computer vision over time. And then BBN and just being at BBN, I actually worked for 5 different employers without my email changing or my phone number changing or my office changing, right? Because it was just I think a very intense acquisition period over those 10, 15 years in this area. Anyway, then I was at Raytheon. And, the old BBN had a little bit more of an academic feel to it. So I thought, and my friends in academia had been asking me for a while, would you come? So I thought, gee, maybe it's time for the next stage in my life. I should go spend some time in academia. So I went to USC, absolute blast. I could indulge all of my learn and be curious leadership principle to the max. But also, unbeknownst to me, and most of us, when you're doing stuff that you're passionate about, you're learning, you're also delivering results. You're also having impact because that's what keeps you going. So all of that worked out. Then, many people I admired, I'd worked with in the past, or just admired from the outside in the speech and language community and in the computer vision community, sort of slowly started ending up at this one place that, it starts with a letter at the top of the alphabet, right? Yes. So I was thinking, okay, this is interesting. And so when they reached out, I had a lot of conversations, and I said, actually, this could be a super next interesting phase. It looks like they're actually delivering impact to real world users. And I thought maybe the next phase in my life should be AI and machine learning in the service of humanity. And so I said, okay, Alexa and Amazon seem like an awesome place to be. And what can I say? It's been a good match. So happy-go-lucky lifestyle that has brought me where I'm super happy to be.
No, that makes sense. I would never, I don't have nearly the background you do in even the AI side of things. But when Alexa came around, I was like, that is a thing I need to work on. how can I have an impact on that stuff too? And so it sounds like we had a similar draw from that regard, but certainly you've got the educational background to really drive you through all this. So when did you join Amazon?
This day, 2 years ago.
Oh, well, happy cake day. That's excellent. So you've been here 2 years. That's excellent. I'm coming up late summer, early fall will be 4 years for me. But I agree with you. I think that this is one of those things that you either love it or it just doesn't have a ton of interest for you. But the more and more I look around, more and more developers, more and more people in general are starting to really think deeply about how do I use this kind of AI? How do I use this kind of technology to solve interesting, hard problems? And I'm really glad that we're here for that. Actually, a couple weeks ago, I had Manoj Sinwani on here, and we were talking about ASR and wake word detection and that kind of stuff. And so we kind of went through the funnel of how Alexa really works, right? If you think about the user speaks into their device, a recording is made, that is shipped off to the cloud. And then we go through the process of speech to text and automatic speech recognition. And then I think that's kind of where the work lands on your plate, right? That's where the stuff that you're working on, the stuff that your team is researching. I think that's where a lot of it lands. I call it natural language understanding, and when I'm talking,
it's a good word.
Yeah, for it. And when developers that I'm speaking to in an audience, when I describe natural language understanding, I always joke that you have your own natural language understanding engine kind of built into your head, and a good example of that is if you've ever been in a relationship, you know that what you say is not exactly what you mean all the time. If you were to translate the words directly, right? And that you're using natural language understanding right there to kind of figure out, like, well, what did they really mean when they said "I'm fine," or whatever that happens to be. But it's a useful way to think about how natural language understanding really works. So my question for you is, how does it work? How does natural understanding work? What are the things that you guys are doing on your team to really make this engine work? What is the research, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I'll make a general comment first, and then sort of talk about a little bit of the specifics of how we do natural language understanding in Alexa. But first, to start with, you mentioned Manoj, so I'll say, my way of putting this is between Manoj and I, we complete Alexa in some way.
Very good.
So, right, he does the. We sort of pick up where there's Manoj no doubt talked about wake word, ASR, etc., and then the ASR transcription comes to us, and now we have to say, okay, this is what they said, and like you pointed out, Jeff, what did they mean, right? And so natural language understanding, generally speaking, is about sort of understanding or extracting and representing and acting upon the semantics of what was said, right? And in the context of Alexa, a lot of the semantics of what you said is what does this person want to know, or what this person like Alexa to do, etc. So we sort of approach it largely from that lens. But before moving very specifically to Alexa, this one thing that you said, about people say I'm fine, and what do you mean when you say I'm fine? Context is so crucial. So if you and I interact all the time, and every time I meet you and I ask you, hey Jeff, how are you? And you say, I'm doing great, Prem. And then one day you say, well, I'm fine. I'm like, okay, something is not right with Jeff, right? But if I just hear that one thing in isolation, I'm fine. Okay, Jeff is fine. Yep. That's good, right? But if this is a guy who always said, I'm great, I'm awesome, and then he says, I'm fine, I'm like, okay, Jeff, what's up? You seem a little downbeat, which seems like a unnatural response to I'm fine.
Right.
Except
if you interpret just the words, it seems like everything should be okay. But when you base it on context and previous experiences, that gives you much more information about what's actually going on. Yeah. Exactly.
And so that, of course, is sort of the aspiration we build towards, right? Understanding more context, understanding, remembering discourse history, etc. But for now, just thinking about the core of natural understanding in Alexa, it's you can imagine Alexa as having a suite of AI services, right? You said you talked about, so you heard about all the stuff on the input side, how the speech is brought in. But then deeper inside Alexa, are services that interpret the user's input. And the technology that we use is called natural language understanding, like you said. Uh, it's also complemented by another technology that I want to talk about. It's called entity resolution, right? So when you and I are talking about Jeff right now, we both know I'm talking about you. But in some other context, it might be some other Jeff.
I think there's other Jeffs that work at Amazon. I've heard maybe there are a couple.
They've been for a few years, yeah. So, or for at least longer than 4. So that's the. So anyway, so each time you speak to Alexa, raw audio is converted into text by the speech recognition system. The text then comes to NLU, what we call interpretations, right, within internally. Our word for NLU is interpretations. So we first determine the intent, right? The most important thing. Does the user want us to, and let me simplify. This is not exactly a complete description, but just to get some hooks in, you want to play a song, turn on a light, you want to hear a joke, or you want to make some kind of comment to Alexa. Sometimes you just want to make a comment. That task, we call it intent classification. Okay. Understanding what the intent is that you have, right? Play a song, right? Now, obviously, if you just said play a song, and I know your history of what you like, etc., I can recommend a good song for you. If I know you're a Led Zeppelin fan, maybe I'll say, okay, Jeff, how about Stairway to Heaven or something? And you'd be like, oh, awesome, let's play Stairway to Heaven, right? But maybe I don't know. So if you just play a song, so now next thing we need to do is, are there mentions of what song or what artist or what album in there? So we call that extraction, or entity extraction or named entity recognition, right? These could be contact name. You're saying, call Jeff. Again, I want to make sure I call the right Jeff, right? So things that's called named entity extraction, extracting the name Jeff, extracting, or say, play Hello by Adele, extract the song name is Hello, and artist name is Adele, etc. Third, we also want to know the domain, right? So for example, I could say play something, and you could have something that's an audio book by that name, like Hunger Games.
Or Harry Potter is another good example.
Audio book name. There might be the movie by the name. So I need to know which domain you're referring to. So if maybe you're standing in front of a device with a screen, and you're saying play Hunger Games, a pretty strong signal. That context gives me a pretty strong signal. You're not expecting me to play the Hunger Games audiobook.
Right.
Another context might be, gee, the person is 20% into the Hunger Games audiobook, and they're asking their screenless Echo device to play Hunger Games. They probably mean continue my audiobook, right? So you have to figure out which domain, and you say it's the book's domain or this, right? Lastly, you do need to resolve this extracted entity into a real-world reference, right? So sometimes you say, play the Stones. Okay, is that a game thing? Let's say I even figured out that it's the music domain, but now I have to resolve the Stones into the Rolling Stones, right? That's entity resolution, because there could be many matches to Stones in any real-world catalog, any real-world database. I have to figure out which is the one that this person meant, and I want to do that as accurately as I can. Then I'll just say, in multilingual systems, there's sometimes a fifth task, which is to identify the language of the utterance.
Oh, yeah.
And you can, this becomes, we'll talk about it later, I'm sure, this becomes particularly important in the context of where I grew up, where I told you about multilinguality. Also important in the case of countries like Japan. You're saying play something, and the name of the song might be an English name. And now you have to go play that song. So multilinguality comes in and is increasingly, as we sort of deliver on our aspiration to serve the entire world with our services, multilinguality becomes more and more important.
Yeah, that was something I know when we rolled out Hindi, that was one of the first things that I really heard about, was that there's a lot of English words that are used in India, and that they will use them at the same time. You see that a lot here in the United States too with Spanish speakers, right? They'll speak in Spanish for some words and English for other words, and they'll kind of mix it together in their households. I imagine that has to add a level of complexity that is significantly more difficult than just handling a language by itself. Is that true?
It is true. And the interesting thing is because, as you know, we are a science and engineering organization. We love complexity because complexity means more science challenges
Right.
to solve. So that's super exciting because if it's not complex, it sort of then feels like not so interesting. So taking complexity and bringing simplicity to the user experience. So taking something that's a complex phenomenon, which is a multilingual utterance, but bringing simplicity to it in terms of the customer experience, which is just the same as if it were a monolingual utterance, right? Bridging that gap is an awesomely satisfying
Yeah.
thing. So yeah, so we're like, bring Klingon next.
That sounds
You know?
perfect. So I'm always curious on this. And this is something that I'm always wondering as I get into this stuff, because again, I tend to be focused on like, how do I build a skill? How do I take advantage of the services that you're offering? Um, are there things that are viewed like, in my mind, mixing two languages together seemed like it was probably close to impossible or really, really difficult. Um, are there problems in the world of voice that are, I don't know, identified but like unsolvable? Are there things that there's
Oh.
no way anyone could ever do that? Or is it all just that they're really hard and with enough research it's possible?
So, you know, I'm fundamentally a technology optimist. So my view is that in the limit, everything is solvable given time and
Sure.
money. So really the question is over what time period and with what resource constraints are we
That's
asking
fair.
asking that question. That said, there are some things, what people call general AI, or artificial general intelligence, like things that just do everything. Because I think humans are particularly good at remembering certain types of context, having like really, really long memories, and being able to tap into the right memory at the right time. You meet your undergraduate classmate from, I don't know, 2, 3 decades ago, and you can pick up the conversation where you last left it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And you can switch back into the language that you and that person shared, or the dialectal way in which you talked about, or the special ways in which you communicated. So there are things around, and I'm just talking about the language. There are many, many other AI problems like that that really go way up. Within the short term, I think there are some things that are challenging, right? Even in the short term, regardless of the detecting sarcasm,
Yeah. Yeah, I can see
uh,
that being really hard.
right? It's right. And when you just said, "Yeah, I know you're not mocking
Right.
me, Jeff. At least I think
I'm
you're
not.
not
I'm not.
mocking me." But you could just as well be, "Oh yeah, well I've already solved it,"
Right.
right? And that would be a mocking
Yeah.
tone. And so it's so hard to tell, or detecting, generally deceptive behavior, etc. There's progress made in these things in some ways, but it's hard to do it. And we also have I'm just keeping it still in the realm of communication, interpersonal communication, but we're just so good at both reading between the lines and reading into visual signals. And so, the way we say something is reinforced so much by the expression in our eyes or our
Right.
faces. So just within the context of interpersonal communication, I think there are lots of challenges that are still left to be solved even in the short term. Uh, and there's such a plethora of interesting challenges to be solved in the short term that are valuable to people who use the
Right.
technology. Yeah, there may be some unsolvable problems, but that's okay. I have to leave something for my daughter to solve when she
Perfect.
graduates.
No, I think that's great. That's just a curiosity of mine, because there are certainly some unsolved problems in computing in general, and so
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
always curious about like the voice, and I'm sure you guys have those things that are aspirational, like sarcasm. Sounds like it would be incredibly difficult. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. So okay, but that really all comes down to research, and so you have an organization, right? You're vice president here at Amazon. I would imagine you have a number of people that work in your organization. What are the primary things that you guys are researching? What are you working on?
So, great question. Yeah, one of the great opportunities at Amazon is to sort of invest at scale in some of the hardest AI problems in conversational AI. So I'll just give you maybe a little bit of a quick tour through the organization in terms of the technical areas that we work in. At the top level, a lot of our organization, my friend Manoj's and mine and many others, we sort of do science to the tier one services that we deploy, right? So when we say we do interpretations, we're advancing the state of the art in interpretations. We're also running the runtime engine that is serving all of our customer traffic, right? So it's all in one organization that makes it that makes the transition of science advances into user-facing capabilities. It accelerates that transition, that structure. So, so at the top level, it's just good to keep that in mind, that when we talk about these areas, we're talking about both the science advancing those areas and then also delivering customer-facing services that run it. So first, of course, as you might understand, you might imagine dialogue management. And the approach we take there is we want to any developer in any locale, anywhere in the world, to build high-value experiences using machine learning, AI, etc. And for us, high value is customers love it. The more customers love it, the more they want to use it, the higher the value. A lot of our approach is around self-serve, around enabling developers, so making entity resolution available to developers. And because we want to deliver services to developers, it's important that we're improving both the developer experience and helping them improve the end user experience. So there's both. So there's delivering self-serve NLU to developers. You're very familiar with this aspect of our work, Jeff. I mean, you are our chief missionary in making a self-serve.
I am in love with entity resolution. It is a hallmark of everything that I build. Is how can I best serve my customer by getting them the answer they most likely wanted?
Yeah. And so, so self-serve natural language understanding or self-serve interpretations to developers. We want developers to be able to build as complex a model as they want, but keep it all as accurate as we can in all the locales in the world we're in. I take great pride in the fact that we are a learning organization. Amazon is, Alexa is, my organization is a learning organization, and we're driven by metrics. We like to, like Lord Kelvin said, if you can't measure it, you don't understand it. I hope the quote is right, or something like that. I believe that very firmly. If we can't measure it, we don't fully understand it. Right? You may have an intuitive understanding. You can't always wait to measure it, but it's over time you have to get a sense of measuring it. So we have actually a metrics research team that identifies new ways of relating technology performance to customer experience, right? Some of it is in my organization, some of it is in other parts of Alexa, but we all work together to provide our developers and our managers with the ability to identify opportunities to improve the customer experience, reduce defects, launch richer experience, etc. Another area is Alexa translations. We launched this about 1.5 years ago. It's already a very popular feature with our customers. I know that me and my oldest daughter, who's been learning Spanish at school, we use it. Alexa, how do I say what's your name in French? Go home and try it. Try it in any of your languages. How do I say this in that language? And actually, it's an interesting experience. We're also focused on language expansion because we want to deliver Alexa experiences to everybody anywhere in the world who wants to experience the magic, right? And so we have a team focused on accelerating internationalization of all of our self-serve stacks.
That's great to hear. I get a lot of questions from developers about when are you going to support my language? And obviously, we're not in a position to talk about roadmap or anything like that. But it's good to know that that's something that we're accelerating on. That's great to hear.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And some of the most interesting problems are at the intersection of new languages and what is new about that relative to what we've done before. But also interesting research problems and how do I transfer learning from previous languages to new languages? That's how you accelerate. Can I do transfer learning? Can I do cross-lingual learning, etc.? Another emerging areas of research, multisensory and interpretable AI. All of this is around making Alexa more perceptive, personal, more conversational, more natural to engage with, more capable. Uh, Last, definitely not the least, something I particularly enjoy is the Alexa Prize Grand Challenge, Jeff.
I'm a big fan of Alexa
What this
Prize. Yeah, it's excellent.
It's an annual university competition. The idea here is we know this. It doesn't matter how big our organization is, how many smart people we have in the organization. The field of conversational AI is bigger than any one organization or any one team. So we wanted to tap into sort of the worldwide community of academic researchers who are working in this area and see together can we solve some of the hardest problems in conversational AI. And so this includes all of this, includes natural language generation. It includes everything I said, but it also includes natural language generation, includes knowledge acquisition. And so it's a great place for the bright stars of tomorrow or, graduate students, undergraduate students to work with faculty advisors to create novel, engaging conversational experiences. We get surprising amount of engagement from Alexa customers on the chatbots that the university teams put up, which tell us that we're tapping into like a common worldwide desire to like sort of advance this and do experimental
That's good.
things.
So I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you the question so you can answer it. If people want to be able to interact with these, because there's a bunch of amazing teams around the world at universities that are building these experiences that are trying to achieve the goal is what, a 30-minute conversation? Is that
20-minute is the grand prize is 20 minutes. And before going down the path that you're asking, let me just say that, and I'm very excited to announce that we're actually in the third iteration of the prize, and we're approaching final season.
wow.
And so I'm looking forward to what happens this year. Do we hit that? Do we hit that golden threshold that we have set? Do we exceed it? Do we fall tantalizingly close to it? So I'm sort of super excited to see where it lands. But
That would
go
be
on,
excellent.
sorry.
So my question is, if anybody that's watching on this video wants to know how to try these or use them, how can they do that?
Simple, 3 words. Alexa, let's chat.
All right. So you say, Alexa, let's. I got devices all over here. I want to make sure I don't
just
set
Alexa,
it off.
let's chat.
And that just picks a random one for me. It lets me tap into a specific project.
No, it picks a random one because what we don't want happening is, we don't expose exactly which university team it is that you're talking to, because that would bias the way you give feedback. So let's say, Trojan alumni, I'm proud to say, will probably be all rah-rah for a system built. Let's say if yes, he's not a competitor this time, but let's say they were. So it might bias your feedback, and because we use user feedback to determine the success of the teams, we want to keep that feedback as unbiased as possible.
And so, if you knew that, for example, there was a Stanford team, you might be like, oh, that's terrible. Like, I don't like their stuff at all, right? Just because it's a competitor, right? It's a rival of another school. I could see how that would definitely influence your behavior.
But let me just say, with my Amazon hat on, I love Stanford.
Good. I think Stanford is great too, but they are rivals in college football and things like that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, that's excellent. Okay, so we've kind of gotten into the stuff that you guys are doing research on. I think that's all very, very cool. Are there when we think about Alexa and like just the experience that people have, can you give me examples of how like this natural understanding that you're working on, how does that, like, maybe we don't always realize, how does that improve the experience that customers have? How does it, like, maybe give me a contrast between like how does it work, how does it help, how does it change things? That'd be a good story to tell.
Yeah. So I'll give you a couple of examples that sort of hopefully give you a flavor of the kinds of things we do. One is what we call complex utterances, but what humans just call speaking naturally, right? I'm sure. So, for example, somebody might come and say, "Hey, Alexa, play jazz music and dim the family room lights," right? That feels awesome, but I just told you about this. Oh, we do intent classification and then we do slots. Okay, now think about this. Now you have 2 intents and you have different entities or mentioned in there. So first you have to detect the 2 intents and then associate the right entities. All of this feels, once we parse down the problem, feels like, oh, okay, that sounds doable. But humans are capable of expressing even simple things in complex ways. So complex things can be expressed in particularly complex ways. And so that we launched about a year ago. And that greatly simplifies sort of the experience for a lot of people. And we did that because we noticed a lot of people wanted to try that, were trying it. And we said, gee, this is a friction for our customers, so we should improve it. But that friction for our customers turned out into a challenging science and engineering problem, both developing the solution and then architecting it in a way. It's one thing to solve the science problem, but then if you take like 2 days to come up with the answer, the customers sort of, their interest is gone. So you have to engineer the solution right so that you're getting the answer as soon as you ask the question, or at least as soon as it feels natural to answer the question, right? So that's one thing. The second one we just talked about, it's multilingual Alexa. I'm very proud of this. So in India, you say, Alexa, what's the weather today? Or you can also say, Alexa, aaj ka weather kya hai, right? So you just put like an English word in the middle of Hindi syntactic structure, like doesn't matter. And you can borrow these words all the time, like volume increase karo, right? So there's sort of Hindi carrier phrase in some way, but a lot of the content is in English. So solving that, but there are many other examples, right? I'm just giving you examples of things where we're, common things people can relate to, but think about skills. We have more than 100,000 skills. I mean, this, you'll tell me that actually 100,000 is wrong. It's probably 110,000, 112,000. You have the latest count, Jeff. All I know is I find it amazing that we have 1 million developers and hundreds of thousands, more than 100,000 skills worldwide. But when you have that many skills, discovery becomes a challenge, no? So you have to remember the name of the skill, right? You have to say, oh, let me invoke the Uber skill and then ask Uber to get me a car. So we're hacking away at that problem by allowing people to just ask for what they want and then figuring out in the back end which skill is the best at providing that service to them and just completing the transaction for users, so that this big universe of 100,000 skills is not limited by the user's knowledge of 8 of them.
Yeah,
right?
That makes sense.
Because everybody knows Jeopardy,
right?
But there are so many other games that are interesting to play, and maybe you want to play, and there are maybe okay. The last thing I'll say on that front is bringing back context again, right? You say, Alexa, get me a car, and if you're looking at a shopping screen, maybe what you mean is you are looking at different toys to buy for your child, and you decided, get me that car. Right. But if it's just a non-contextual thing, or if I know that you have a flight, if you've entered your calendar information, and I know you have a plane to catch in 2.5 hours, and you say, get me a car, I say, oh, dude wants a cab, right? And so that kind of thing, that naturalness, people just, and I take great pride in the fact that when people take it for granted, and then even at social events or parties, and people ask, and I say, okay, this is why it's challenging. And they say, oh my God, I had no idea it was all those challenges. So it gives me great pride when people just take it for granted that AI works this way, because then it feels to me we've done it just right. They're getting the experience they want, and they don't even have to think about how complex it is to do it.
No, I think that's awesome. That's very, very cool. So, ICASP was last month. Did you have an opportunity to attend some of the sessions that were there?
ICASP, no, because I have to tell you, one of the challenges over years, I was very involved in planning some of the things leading up to ICASP. I was very much looking forward to attending some of the sessions. But, we all know what the challenge the last 2-3 months have been. And I felt I had to spend more time with my team, making sure I was addressing the challenges they're facing, doing what I can. So yeah, it's, what can I say? There was a time when, missing ICASP or, other conferences would be, oh my God, how could I do that? And now it's a little bit like a luxury. Man, next year, I'm really going to go to ICASP.
I think the prices and the attendance of conferences next year are going to be out of control. I run a conference myself that we had to cancel this year, and I imagine because everybody missed, the next year is even going to be a much bigger demand. So related to that though, like, can you talk to me about Alexa Conversations and kind of how you're thinking about conversational AI?
Yeah. So actually, the Alexa Conversations workshop was the workshop that I'd wanted my team to do there, because I think it's an important thing. And when I said I was involved in some of the prep, that was one of the things I was very interested in. So just to frame what is Alexa Conversations, skills developers can develop skills today, using the process that we have. But as we've been thinking about how to make this process simpler for developers, remember I told you, like, we want to make the developer experience better and enable them to deliver better end user experiences as well, or improve the end user experience. So that context, Alexa Conversations is a deep learning based approach, like so many things today, for creating conversational experiences. But where we're using machine learning is to reduce the number of lines of code they have to write. Big reduction, but let me just say it's by a factor of sometimes, both because of reusability and because of the way in which we've simplified the process of developing a new skill, but also by reducing the amount of training data that's needed, right? And to reduce the amount of training data, we're leveraging deep learning in multiple ways, whether it's transfer learning, whether it's data generation automatically from what the users give us, and also just new innovations in state tracking, state trajectory, etc. So that's Alexa Conversations. Early example of Alexa Conversation, just to give a sort of a flavor of the kind of application that's enabled by it. Early example of Alexa Conversations is the night out functionality.
Yeah, I remember when that was announced. That was cool.
Yeah, last remars, and we had to cancel this year's remars, which is still something I was so looking forward to. Talk about things that you were looking forward to that couldn't do. And I enjoyed all your sessions at the last remars, by the way. So the night out functionality is, imagine a family planning a night out, and they first have to remember, okay, I want to go book, figure out which movie to watch, and then maybe pick a restaurant to eat, and maybe I need to arrange transportation to go there, etc., etc. Now, instead of you having to specifically do each one of these tasks, wouldn't it be great? The thinking back then was, wouldn't it be great if you just say, I want to plan a night out, and then Alexa takes care of all the transitioning between different skills required to complete your mission for that evening, and you just keep articulating sort of what you want and what you'd be interested in doing. Or maybe it's not a movie, maybe it's going to a museum, and then the ability to buy the museum tickets, that transaction is completed, and then do you need transportation to go there, or do you need parking? So things like that, all of that packaged into one. You can interact with Night Out today. It takes care of all of it. Of course, these are challenging times to use Night Out. We get that, right? But we're looking, but it won't always be this way. There will be a time when we're all planning lots of nights out again. And I'm sure, just like you were saying, conference prices might go up. I think the number of people desiring to go out will greatly increase. Last thing I'll just say is Alexa Conversations also sets the stage for component reusability. In addition to data generation, to simplify and reduce the burden on the developer for creating lots of data, we do it on the back end. There's also reusability, and data we have reduced in many examples working with developer partners, and very grateful for them for partnering with us. Data has been reduced by a factor of 10 in many cases, achieving the same or better levels of performance, and reusability is improving this by a factor of 3, the amount of code that you need to write.
Excellent. All right, so we talked a little bit about Night Out, which was, I remember the first time that I saw that, I was just blown away that, like, we can piece all this stuff together and really allow those conversations to happen where we can just kind of dig in. I would use it as an example of something that I aspire for, and we don't need to get into this. I'm just going to share this with you. Is the idea that I could say to Alexa, Alexa, I need a dentist appointment, and she goes, okay, you have an appointment scheduled for next Tuesday. Like the context and the work behind the scenes to make all of that happen is remarkable. It has to talk to my insurance company. It has to talk to my dentist systems. It has to talk to all these other places. But man, what a world it will be when I can just do that and it happens, and I don't have to make a call and wait on hold and compare schedules. You know,
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
Even in the context of night out, Jeff, as you're doing this context that you just mentioned, carrying over context from one conversation to the next, like maybe you asked are there any Mexican restaurants? What are the nearby Mexican restaurants? Or maybe you asked about a movie where it's playing. Then if the next thing is that you're booking a car, you don't want to have to say the location of the movie theater or of the restaurant. Right. That should just be carried over by Alexa for you. And we do it now in the night out experience. Excellent. So totally with you, context is king in many ways.
Right. So as we talk about things like conversation, which rely on things like AI, there's always a conversation about fairness in AI. And I know this is something that's near and dear to you. So how are we addressing questions around that? How are we trying to mitigate bias and things like that?
Yeah. So first, the fact that fairness in AI is an increasingly important question, and it has rightfully increasing amounts of attention worldwide across many equities, is also testimony to the success of AI in the sense that AI is everywhere. So now that it's getting everywhere or into more and more places, we now have the responsibility of making sure AI works equally well for everyone. Right? That's crucial. And so the underlying thrust of our work in fairness, both that we're doing internally and that we're sponsoring externally, is to make sure that AI works equally well for everyone. It will take a lot of effort. It's not going to be just us. It's going to be a broad, public, private, academia kind of concerted effort. Nonprofits will be involved, industry, academia, interest groups, right, representing the different kinds of considerations in fairness. One of the ways we are addressing it, in addition, of all the areas of AI, I think fairness requires really a multi-sector participation. So one of the early ways in which I started addressing it after joining Amazon was we launched this partnership with NSF to do fund programs in the fairness of fair AI. It's about 20 million in grants. Half of it comes from Amazon, half of it from NSF. The funded projects, selection is left entirely to NSF. We simply provide the funding. Our interest was in seeing the development of a funded academic research community that is addressing these problems and providing new insights that everyone, corporations, government, everybody can use to develop better AI for all of us. So ensuring fairness in algorithms, the systems that incorporate them, using AI to promote equity in society, etc. A couple of examples, if you're interested in projects that are being funded, you can go to the Amazon Science blog, excellent website, where you can get a list of all the complete set of projects and who's working on them, etc. But one example that caught my attention as I was looking through it was we've known for quite some time that certain ethnic groups have higher rates of heart disease than others. And concomitant with that is a higher rate of post-operational issues, complications that arise. And so the question is, how do you improve this? How do you make it more equally performant for all of these ethnic groups or different cohorts of people? The other thing another project is we don't have a sense of the disparity, how much of that disparity is due to biological factors. So how much of it is due to socioeconomic factors? How much is due to sort of differences in quality of care across different geographies or even different training for doctors and nurses and care personnel? So the project is trying to bring AI tools to, rich electronics health record data set to sort of characterize, create new insights into how is all of this, what might be the most salient root causes, and how can we address them, etc. The other thing I'll say is we also participate in multi-sector initiatives like the Partnership on AI.
Oh, good. I was going to ask you about that.
I represent Amazon on the board of PAI, and PAI works to generate. It's there are nonprofits, there's academic members on the board, company representatives on the board, corporation representatives, and PAI works to generate sort of best practices, development and deployment of ethical AI technology among the many things that they do. PAI is developing a sense of sort of the future of AI across many different spectrums, whether it's documentation for AI and other things. But the thing that in this context, that's worth pointing out is best practices for the development and deployment of ethical AI technology. So I think we feel like that's the way to advance, build multi-sector partnerships, build a national or even international coalition around these important issues, try to fund it so that the people who are closest to the issues are developing the insights that can guide us the best, make those insights available to everyone, because fairness is important enough that all of these insights should be shared, and then hope that everybody uses these insights to develop the best systems that they can.
Oh, that's excellent. All right, so we're coming up close on time. We've been talking for almost an hour, and
wow.
I have two more things for you. I'm going to do the quick one first, and then I'm going to the longer answer one we'll leave for the very end. One of the things that I like to ask people is, how many Alexa devices do you have in your house? They have to actually be plugged in. I got caught on this question once, and somebody said 100. And I said, you don't have 100. And they said, no, I have a closet, and there's actually 60 devices in the closet that I use for giveaways and things. So I want to know how many you actually have plugged in and that you actually use.
I'm glad you said that, because I don't have 100, but I do have 7 that are plugged in and we use. My daughter's rooms, our bedroom, dining room, living room, office, all of that, right? And it's great because, the way we all work is to get exercise, we go to the gym, but otherwise we're lazy. We don't want to walk around the house.
Right.
So it's awesome to drop in on my daughter and say, hey, it's time for dinner. You want to?
I do it every night. So we actually made chicken tikka masala last night for dinner with some naan. It was delicious. And, I had to announce. I do it every night. I make dinner, and then I have to announce to everybody, like, come on downstairs. It's time for dinner. So I always do it in, funny voices and stuff like that.
So that's your legacy from your India trip earlier this year, I take it, Jeff?
I did.
Chicken tikka masala.
I got to go with Amit Jatwani to India for a little while. He took me around Delhi, and we had some of the most fantastic food I've ever had. I don't have a broad exposure to Indian food in my life, but the times that I've had it, man, it's fantastic. And so I'm trying to bring that into the house a little bit and introduce my family to some of those flavors they've never had before. All right, so the last question I have for you, and I hinted at this when we talked earlier, you've worked on a lot of really interesting natural understanding projects and technologies for Alexa. Is there one you can call out as the thing you're the most proud of, or the thing that you kind of hold up as I'm so excited that I was able to do this?
So, Jeff, what I'll say is this. So the thing that I'm most excited about, and therefore will be most proud about, is coming. We will be announcing it later this year. Can't talk about it now, as you know. But of the things that we have done, the one that I'm most proud of, or a couple of things that I'm very proud of, most is such a hard question to answer oftentimes. One is the launch of Alexa in Hindi, partly because it relates back to my origins in India. One of my undergraduate classmates came for the launch event on his own. He was so excited to see that one of his classmates is part of
that's great. What a great story.
Awesome. And so our sense of pride comes from also the group of people whose opinions we care about a lot. They're our friends, they're people we go. But also because we made Alexa capable of multilingual utterances. It was not done before. Second thing I'm really, really proud of is this partnership that I just mentioned that we launched with the NSF to drive fairness in AI research. I was so delighted that we as a company would invest that money and leave the selection process entirely to the NSF and say, look, what we really want to do is drive research in this area, and we want to understand what people find out and we want to learn from it. So those are two things but honestly, the customer-facing hurdles, the ones I'm most excited about, are the ones that we're working on now. And you know it, I know it.
Yeah, and I feel like we need to make...
and the rest of the world will know it.
We need to make more noise about that stuff. We talked earlier about how you could have multiple utterances in the same statement and be able to parse them and say, like, turn the light off and play this song or something like that. That's actually something until you and I planned out this conversation, that was not even something that I knew about. Was that was possible, right? I had tried it a long time ago and it didn't work, and so then it never became part of my vernacular. And so I feel like we need to be making loud announcements about this stuff and let the world know, like, hey, this stuff is possible now. It's so great.
Yeah. It's like being in a festival, right, Jeff? There's just so many attractions and all of them are screaming equally loudly at you. So the one that you go to within Alexa, it's just so much happening in Alexa. There's so much excitement. We're launching so many things. I think every collection of users goes to the ones that they hear the most about at that particular thing. And you're right. But maybe the other thing is also just over time, as people start figuring out, there's so many things I can do with this. And as there's more smart home devices and there's more happening, etc. I think all of these, our goal is not to promote the use of any one of these features, but to build all of these towards creating this totally natural interaction, right? So each one of these, I see it as a step function. And one way of looking at it is, are more people using Alexa, and are more people as a fraction happier with their use of Alexa? And on those metrics, I get super excited about the data we see.
All right. Well, Prem, I can't thank you enough for coming and having this conversation with me today. This has been just absolutely outstanding. I learned a lot, and I'm hoping that our audience picked up a bunch of useful things as well between the partnership with AI and a lot of the other things that you talked about. I think this is really great that we're able to share all of this with the people that care so deeply about Alexa. So thank you for being here today.
Jeff, thank you. Thanks to the audience for their time listening to this. I totally enjoyed this conversation. Like you said, I couldn't believe that an hour has passed by. And I was almost at the place where I forgot the duck and the horses, but they're coming back to me now.
Oh, no. Well, please, I hope there's no nightmare fuel there for you. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you so much. We'll be here again next week. I'm bringing some people in from our product team to talk about some of the cool stuff that they have at work as well. So thank you again, Prem. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, take care. Bye.